day. Welcome into a Wednesday, January 29th edition of Daily Faceoff Live. Streaming to you live on the Daily Faceoff YouTube. You can drop us in your hashtag AskDFO inbox questions for later. The show, as always, brought to you by Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. I'm Tyler Yaremchuk. He is my co-host for the day, Colby Cohen, who is, I want to know what the story is. Grandpa Colby, everyone's calling you? What's the joke here?
I'm not 100% sure. The chat was buzzing this morning for Morning Cup of Hockey. We were talking about fighting and how fighting is important. And maybe I'm getting a bad rep, but I don't know. You'll have to ask.
I thought there was maybe some long-running Morning Cuppa joke that I was missing out on here. Anyways, Morning Cup of Hockey this morning with Patrick Maroon. That is certainly worth a listen right here on the Daily Faceoff YouTube. We got our Dominion Lending Center's poll question up right now, and it is, what % chance do you give the Boston Bruins of making the playoffs? And Colby, it's a perfect tie-in to our first topic for today, which is about those big bad Bruins, and bad last night, not in the good sense. They were sleepy. They were hibernating. The Buffalo Sabres pop home matching double hat tricks from J.J. Peterka and Tage Thompson as they rout the Boston Bruins 7-2. That loss puts the Boston Bruins outside of the playoff picture when you sort by points percentage, Colby. So what do you make of this slide from Boston and sort of their continued mediocrity?
Well, look, let's start with this fact. Charlie McAvoy was not in the game last night. Hampus Lindholm, has been working his way back from an injury. So when you look at how the Bruins started yesterday's game, you're talking about Nikita Zadorov, or Zadorov as you call him, and Andrew Peeke as your top pair. You're talking about the leaders in ice time for that Boston Bruins last game. Parker Wotherspoon had about 21 plus minutes. Lorei played 23. Peeke played 21 or 22. You look at this decor without Charlie McAvoy and Hampus Lindholm, and it looks a lot different, right? I mean, you are missing essentially your top two guys. And then you look at the way they gave up goals. Well, Lindholm, the one who is playing, had a bad turnover in the offensive zone, then a rush goal. You look at some of the other goals, total breakdowns in and around the net. And then there were a couple that I thought Swayman should have had. They were good shots. Like J.J. Peterka, it was a rocket of a shot, but it was from distance. I want my $8.5 million goalie that I have sung praises for to make that save. So do I think the Boston Bruins are a playoff team? Yeah, I do think they end up in a wild card spot. They go into this deadline. I don't think they should be big buyers by any means. I think this year is a year where they're not a contender. If you get into the playoffs, great. Move on from Trent Frederick. He's really the only guy that you have that's a UFA that has any value. Wotherspoon's not going to get you a whole lot, right? And he's also a UFA. And then you have a couple of RFAs. Cole Koepke is a UFA. Brazil's a UFA. Like, none of these guys are really fetching you a return, right? So, yeah, I think you can get into the playoffs, but I don't think it would be smart to make any hasty decisions, because I think this summer they need to make some big moves. They need to trade some guys. Like, I have not been a fan of the way Zadorov has fit in there. I'm not saying they're going to be able to get off of his contract, but I haven't liked it. Lindholm has been kind of up and down. I haven't loved that. Pasta has come on, and he's come along. I think he'll will them into the playoffs, in my opinion, and I think you'll get enough saves out of Swayman late. But I think they need to just be okay with being okay this year, which I know is a difficult thing for a Boston Bruins fan to hear.
First off, you do not get to make fun of how I say Nikita Zadorov and then call Justin Brazeau Justin Brazil.
Oh, I don't get names right. I'm a butcher. Like, I'm the butcher of last names. But I just know that some people say Zadorov and some people say Zadorov. I wasn't actually making fun of you. I just know because you and I are so close and we talk so often that you are a Zadorov guy, not a Zadorov guy. I was really just being respectful to you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry it came off. I'm sorry it didn't come off in the right way.
Yeah, that's fine. So again, I agree with you. Like Frederick, Brazeau, you can find takers for those guys. You can get a couple of mid-round picks. And I know people might sit there and be like, what's the point of getting a second and a fourth for those two guys if you think you're a playoff team and those guys can maybe help you? But the point is, if you're not going to win a Stanley Cup this year, which they're not, even when they're healthy, I don't think they're a legit Stanley Cup contender. You need to stock the cupboards a little bit, and getting a few more darts to throw at the dartboard. As much as you can sit there and go, a second round pick has a blank percent chance of being a full-time NHLer and a fourth round pick has a blank percent chance of being an NHLer. You need to get those percentages at some point. Like, you need to eventually start adding some young pieces to the lineup. And again, this year, 2025, they don't have a second, they don't have a fourth. Punt a little bit. I agree with you. Like, if I'm them, I'm not trading Brandon Carlo. I'm not trading Brad Marchand as he's a pending UF. I'm not doing any of that stuff.
Maybe this summer, maybe Carlo this summer for the right deal, right? But don't panic. Listen, is Don Sweeney and Cam Neely, are they going to be the ones still running the team next year? I'm not 100% convinced, right? So keep your field positioning and just kind of try to hang in there and make the playoffs. It's not your year, Boston. It's just not your year.
Yeah, and that's what Jeremiah says too. They should be sellers, and they should be looking for a new GM and a new POHO as well, maybe a new scouting staff. And yeah, I mean, that's summertime conversations, but I definitely get where our boy Jeremiah is coming from. Let's stick in the Eastern Conference and talk about sort of the mush that's around the Boston Bruins. I mean, they're not the only team facing a similar or being in a similar position here. And the picture we have at the bottom of the screen is Matt Barzal of the New York Islanders. Colby, they've rattled off 5 straight wins. They're 8-2 now in their last 10. By points percentage, they're tied with the New York Rangers, and yet Frank Saravalli's trade targets board is littered with New York Islanders, Palmieri and Nelson. And we know Lou Lamoriello is not the type of GM to sit here and punt on a season if his team's got a shot. But if you're an Islanders fan, there has to be a really big part of you that's going like, stop winning. Stop winning. We need to sell. We are not going to win a Stanley Cup, and our GM won't do the right thing unless we're 20 points out of a playoff spot. It's got to be frustrating.
Well, and I got to think this is Lou's last year. I just can't see a world where he comes back. And, you know, the Islanders have just been an average team forever. But I'll tell you what I like, okay? I like the Anthony D'Angelo signing. I like the Scott Perunovich signing. You just went out and you got 2 guys who can move the puck, right? Are they great defensive players? They haven't been in their careers, okay? Is Patrick Waugh going to get a little more defending out of both of them? Potentially, right? But they're low cost, they're low risk, and they have good upside, right? And to me, both of those guys make your team a little bit faster and a little bit more fluid in the offensive zone. And the Islanders have struggled to score goals all season, but here's what I'm going to say, okay? You are not building a team around Matthew Barzal, and you haven't, and you've tried, and you've gone out and got Bo Horvat, and as Lou said, you gave him too much money and for too many years. I think you got to move on from Brock Nelson. Like, it's time to maybe not burn it down and have a rebuild, but it's time to have a big retool in New York, because you are not winning with this core of people. You're just not. And you know, it might be hard for Isles fans to walk away from Barzal, but he's just not a guy who you're building around. He's a winger. To me, he at times doesn't get to the inside. You know, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Patrick Waugh. Is he going to remain there if Lou doesn't? There's just so many questions around it. If you can get good asset returns for Brock Nelson, which somebody will give you, you've got to make that move. What are you going to crawl into the playoffs in the 8th spot and lose in the first round anyway? Although the East is, you know, there's a lot more parity. Like, there's, other than Washington, is there really a dominant team in the East night in and night out? Not really consistently. So I don't know, man. I look at the Islanders and I just kind of roll my eyes and shake my head.
I'm with you on that one. It doesn't make sense. I mean, when we talked about them earlier in the week, it was like they were 5 points away from catching the New York Rangers. They were also 5 points away from being a bottom 5 team and getting a really good draft pick this June. And then what do? Bing, bing, win a couple of games. And now it's like, oh shit, Lou's going to convince himself they got a shot. Yeah. Johnny Lazarus, if the Islanders make the playoffs, I'll get a tramp stamp. Pat, we're going to need a nice clean screenshot of this bad boy for future reference.
He already has that, so this doesn't even count, but he gets upset if I tell people what the tramp stamp is, so I'm not going to do it. He told me that's a line he doesn't want me to cross, but for the record, he already has one of those.
Just again, reading this, I'm going to change my tune from the last segment. I think the Islanders should buy. I think they should go all in. Ilya Sorokin can take them to the promised land. Let's go out west here for a second and talk about, it's a similar conversation, but it's in the other conference here. The Anaheim Ducks are a team now, like they've won 3 in a row, and it's all of a sudden, are they going to start convincing themselves that they have a shot at this thing? If they win their game in hand, they're going to be tied with St. Louis. If they win their game in hand, they're going to be ahead of a team like Utah. And it's like, man, I mean, we have Seattle on the screen here too. I think Seattle has a very easy decision. Like, you need to get a superstar at some point, and the only way to do that is to stink for a couple of years, quit adding mediocre players to your lineup. If you're Anaheim, again, are they convincing themselves that they don't need to sell? I would argue there's not that much for them to sell anymore outside of like a, say, Brian Dumoulin, but Anaheim, St. Louis, these kind of teams who are like, it's going to be way too hard for them to get back into the playoff picture in the final 30 games. I think they should sell, but I think they might do something stupid and try stay in the mix.
Yeah, I mean, look, I actually would love to focus on Seattle for a second here because,
Okay.
you know, what struck me as like a little bit of a head shaking moment is every one of their players who either makes money or has term has a modified no move or no trade. I mean, they have been given out on this Seattle roster like Tic Tacs, right? Is that what you need to do to get players to Seattle? Maybe that's the problem. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 players who are every night players for this team have either no moves, no trades, or modifieds. It's difficult to move guys with money and term when they have a say in it, right? Because the teams that generally take those contracts on are teams that you might not want to go play for. So I don't know what they're doing in Seattle. I mean, it is baffling to me. That's another team that Johnny Lazarus thought was going to make the playoffs, along with the Utah, no names at this point. But, and then you switch gears a little to Utah. You've got Ian Cole and you've got Oli Mata. They're both UFAs. They both make $3 million. They both do have some value. I think Ian Cole's got a winning pedigree. I think he's a good guy to have around. But again, like, you can find guys like that, and sort of hang on to them and not get assets. And you may not need 100 draft picks, Tyler, because what are you going to do with all them? But you can then hoard draft picks, then use them to go get the guy that you want at the draft when you're saying, oh, you want to move up? Okay, I want this guy, and I'll give you a first, and you can have the 5th overall pick, whatever. So, like, get your assets. You're not a playoff team.
I'm with you. Again, one area that I think they should sell off on, you mentioned Ian Cole. I think they could, if they wanted to, get a haul for another one of their defensemen. If you look at now that they're healthy, right? Once Durzi gets back into the lineup, you're sitting there with Sergachev, Durzi, Marino, Cole, Mata, Valimaki, Kesselring. Bortuzzo's still hurt, but you have a guy like Maverick Lamoureux down in the minors who came up and showed really well for a couple of games. Like 8 defensemen who could play in your lineup at any given point here. Man, everyone always needs defensemen at the deadline, contenders, that is. You could probably get a haul for one of those guys, especially if you decide to move like a Marino, a guy with term. And like you said, then use those assets, go get yourself a good young player somewhere. Go get Dylan Cousins out of Buffalo or something like that. We're going to go to the West again in a second and talk about the Vancouver Canucks. But first, our deadline countdown series for today is all about Montreal Canadiens forward Jake Evans. He's putting together a really nice season, Colby, basically a career year. He's at 11 goals in 50 games. His career high is 13. He's 4 points away from his career high in points, and he's doing it all in a contract year. $1.7 million against the cap this season. And hey, the Canadiens are another one of those teams like the Islanders and the Ducks in Utah. They're like, they're right there. They're in the playoff conversation, but are they authentically in the mix to be a playoff team? Shrug. I don't know. But what do you make of a guy like Evans? I mean, some comparable deals I drummed up here. Last year, Alex Wenberg, again, a middle 6 centerman, if you want to call him that. He went to the New York Rangers for a 2nd and a 4th. There's a guy like Anthony Mantha. He's a winger, not a centerman, but he went for a 2nd and a 4th, and he was putting up better numbers at the time that he was traded, but he also had a really high cap hit. Like, the idea that the Habs could get a 2nd-round pick for a guy like Jake Evans is not far-fetched at all. They definitely could, but is it smart for them to sell off a piece like that and, again, subtract from this young team?
I think it is, right? I mean, this is a guy who has 11 goals, okay? He's a 3rd-line player on a really good team. He might be a 4th-line center. Listen, I equate it to like Jack Drury. And when I was trying to wrap my head around that trade the other day, and I'm like, yeah, but they got deeper and they got Jack Drury. And then I said, wait a sec. You can find a Jack Drury. And that's not to be disrespectful to him, because he's been really good since he went to Colorado. But like, these are not the players that are hard to find. You can find these guys for $1 million. And Jake Evans, if he's having this year, is going to want to raise, right? They've got a lot of cap space. Montreal's already got 2 second round, 2 firsts, 2 seconds, and 2 thirds this year. So maybe you say, listen, I'll let you wait an extra year and you can get an even higher pick, or you'll have 3 second round picks, which you can move. And then maybe you end up with 3 first round picks. You use it to get into the first round. Look, the Montreal Canadiens are going to play hard until the end. They play for Marty St. Louis. They've got some young superstars with guys that are emerging into this league to be real nice players. And so I don't know. Like, I'm not hanging on to Jake Evans, right? He's a guy that you can find in the summer. He's a guy that you can find for value and find for cheap. And, right now, this is not a team that's going to contend. And if they lose Jake Evans, really, what's that? Is that really going to go from, they would make the playoffs to they wouldn't? I don't know about that. I think we're overselling. Listen, ask the New York Rangers how they feel about giving a big contract to a young guy who played 300 games in the league, who told us who he was, had a great year in a contract year, got his contract, and then basically took all the money to the Bahamas, and you haven't really seen him since play for the New York Rangers, right? So we were talking about Johnny's lower back tattoo earlier. I think now you know whose face he has lower tattooed on his lower back. So
the one argument I'll make, and I know we're running behind, we got to get to our friend Jeff Paterson, but the difference between a Montreal and a New York Islanders to me is the Islanders are full of vets. Like, again, you need to restart the process there. For Montreal, is they're not value in giving some of these young guys big game experience, get their juices flowing, have them as a part of a push for a playoff, and instill some amount of a winning culture there. Like, punting maybe sends a bad message to a young core. But again, is Jake Evans the difference between pushing for the playoffs or not pushing for the playoffs? Probably not. And I like the line you said about those kind of players. You can find them for $1 million. It is way more difficult to find superstar game breakers. Those kinds of players rarely ever get on the trade market, Colby, right? Yeah. Vancouver. That's my tie-in to our big segment there, which is brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers, proudly Canadian owned and operated since 1972. And you can apply today for the Charm Diamond Flexity card and get approved for no interest financing on your purchase in minutes. You can get a custom ring built and delivered in less than 4 weeks through the Charm Masterpiece program. For more information, go to charmdiamondcenters.com. Always a pleasure to welcome our friend Jeff Paterson to the show. He hosts Rink-Wide Vancouver postgame. He's on Sekeres and Price. He's over on Canucks Army as well. And JPAD, all the drama is always in Vancouver. And there was another interesting wrinkle this week as Jim Rutherford came out and gave what I would call a bit of a puzzling interview. And I guess that's kind of where I want to start with this. Like, Rutherford comes out and speaks. We've heard Rick Tocchet have moments in the media. Quinn Hughes has had moments in the media addressing this Paterson and Miller drama, beef, whatever you want to call it. What do you make of sort of the PR and the way the Canucks have handled this externally?
Yeah, just another crazy day here in paradise. And look, I thought we were all going to wake up on Tuesday morning and kind of regale in the fact that the Canucks had won back-to-back games for the first time in nearly 2 months. And they did a lot of good things in St. Louis on Monday night. Jim Rutherford had other ideas, clearly. And so, yeah, a fascinating read, Gary Mason in the Globe and Mail. And Jim left no doubt that he is prepared to burn this thing to the ground, quite frankly. And I think there's a couple things here. One, and I've seen a ton of it personally in my own mentions, but just the media collective here, taking a lot of heat in Vancouver that this was a figment of our imagination, that, this isn't a deal if you guys stop talking about it. Well, laid it bare for all to see. And that, yes, finally somebody in the organization coming out and saying, absolutely. But beyond that, it's that this is now a gap that cannot be bridged. That, that I think was the biggest takeaway. The president of hockey operations coming out and saying it's untenable. That, we've worked through it. There have been times where we thought we were on the right track. Nope. Something's got to give. And so the question now is, what's the something? And is it one? Is it both of them? What does that look like? And, from a PR standpoint, Tyler, look, mixed messaging has long been part of the issue for the Vancouver Canucks. A week ago, Patrick Allvin stood and took questions for 20 minutes. This is the general manager. Mid-season, it was just a check-in. It wasn't a press conference of any kind. It was just Patrick Allvin holding court. Spoke for 20 minutes, didn't really say much, but did his best to sort of lower the temperature. He backed the core group. He said he believed in the hockey club, and he felt that, yes, this was a playoff team. And a week later, Jim Rutherford comes out and says, that's cute, Patrick. Just step aside. The big dog has to bark here. And then says what he said yesterday. So it's just kind of been a season of that. The left hand doesn't really know what the right hand is saying or doing. And as a result, the hockey club is sort of spinning, swirling around the drain below the playoff bar here they hit the 50 game mark tonight in Nashville. And just way more questions than answers. Anytime anybody speaks in this organization, it leaves more questions than answers.
Well, I'll say this. From what I've heard, Patrick Allvin is more of a head scout, and Jim Rutherford, we know, is running the ship. Why would he make his job so much harder by publicly coming out and saying this and basically taking the 5% of leverage he might have had left in I'll just hold on to them, and publicly announcing that he's burning it to the ground? He even mentioned Quinn Hughes' name, which is cringeworthy. Why? I just can't come up with a scenario where this would be helpful.
Well, Colby, see that brick wall behind you? I feel like the entire city of Vancouver has just been banging its head against that wall for the last 24 hours, certainly. Now, let's be honest. There are no secrets in the hockey world. Like, people talk. Every acquiring general manager knows that there are massive issues here and that the Canucks aren't holding a ton of cards. So, is this messaging to ownership that this is something that has to happen? Is it Jim Rutherford basically just laying it bare and saying, enough? We've protected these players long enough. We just want to get all of the truth out there. But I hear you. I mean, optically, and again, it goes back to sort of this idea of mixed messaging. It is sort of hard to figure out. And a lot of people were upset that they thought that the interview had been done in the wake of the St. Louis victory. And people were like, they finally won 2 in a row. Like, why would he come out and say it now? But the interview was done on Monday and published on Tuesday. But I also think that there's sort of, some intel in that as well that, they came off a good win over Washington on Saturday night. And was this Jim Rutherford sort of picking this time to say this, to basically express he has no confidence in this team winning 2 in a row, let alone winning anything greater than that? And there are quotes in there as well that basically say, we're not going to win with this core. They've come to that conclusion. And so now it's what's the next course of action? And that's where I go back to where I say, it's just been a crazy year here. This was just yet another day, heap it on the pile. There's too much talent for this team to be below the playoff bar. And the two central figures in this drama, to hear Jim Rutherford say, now it's reached the locker room. Clearly it's affecting the play of the team, but it's also impacted. I mean, JT had to step away for 10 games. Elias Paterson is producing at, a 55-point pace, making close to $12 million. Just out of market for people that realize there's a ton of smoke in Vancouver. Elias Paterson was a 102-point player a couple seasons ago. When he's on and dialed in, he's done things under the age of 25 that not many guys have done. Through all of this, he has a couple of goals. He has 2 assists in his last 16 hockey games, a 1 or 2C on the power play, every power play. And he has set up 2 goals in the last 16 games. How? How is that possible? Making $11.6 million. So if I'm an acquiring team, what am I looking at here? Am I looking at the guy that got to 102 points, or are we looking at a guy that's, riding that reputation and got this contract, but he's not making the players around him better. He's not contributing an awful lot to the Canuck cause here. And JT, he scored his first goal in 10 games the other day in St. Louis. So, it's dogging both of them. They're the guys that have got the issues, but so individually their performance isn't where it has to be, collectively as a group. And that's why I think Jim Rutherford's come to the conclusion that this just ain't it. Last year was the outlier. It was a ton of fun, 50 wins and game 7 and round 2. But that now seems to be last year. And, I think we're getting a better sense of this is more who the Vancouver Canucks really are.
So again, safe to say one of those big dogs is getting moved. Is it also then safe to say if they don't believe they can win this year, they got to be trading Brock Besser, and they probably have to consider trading Kevin Lankinen as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's now pretty apparent that everything is on the table, including Quinn Hughes, which, like, the quote was, we don't want to get to that. We want Quinn Hughes to be here forever. But if we're burning it down, we have to consider that as well. But yeah, look, Brock's coming to the end of a contract here, 40 goals last year. He's been spotty this year and suffered a head injury back in November that kind of slowed him a little bit. But there would be interest around the National Hockey League without a doubt. And we saw last year he was a playoff performer, and it was unfortunate that he wasn't able to play in Game 7 against the Oilers. But, they've come this far without an extension. I think the organization has basically made it clear that he's not in their plan, certainly not at the price and the term that he would want as a 28-year-old unrestricted free agent who's got a 40-goal season. He's going to get paid. I just don't think it's going to be by the Vancouver Canucks. So, yeah, I'm sort of hedging that his time now is winding down. Lankinen's fascinating because you've got Demko, who just hasn't been anywhere close to the Vezina finalist that he was a year ago, and we all know the backstory and all he's been through. But you've got a guy that delivers. Lankinen's got 18 of their 22 wins this year. And he gives them the better chance to win right now. So are you trading him, or are you considering trading the other guy at some point here who's got 1 year left at $5 million? If he can ever get back to anywhere close to the level he was at last year, he could be a steal for a team out there. But again, there's just so much uncertainty around so many of these individuals, and you add it all up, and it's just been remarkably underwhelming for the Vancouver Canucks.
Jeff, as always, appreciate your time. Appreciate the insight. You can find him on Rinkwide Vancouver. You can read him over on Canucks Army. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, I got to get one of those brick walls, Colby. I just kind of feel like it would be therapy these days covering this hockey club. So thanks for having me on, guys.
Tyler, how about this? I'm doing the sheet today at 3:10. Ooh. Bruce Boudreau going on the sheet today at 4 p.m. to talk about Vancouver, probably his relationship with GM, president, ownership. Like, be there to listen to Bruce Boudreau on the sheet today at 4 o'clock, because I wouldn't be shocked if Bruce just kind of airs it all out and just pours more gasoline on that dumpster fire.
Oh, that could be really good. All right. Poll question results for our friends at Dominion Lending Centers. Is your mortgage up for renewal? Lock in the best rates and products with Dominion Lending Centers. Visit dominionlending.ca. What % chance do you give the Boston Bruins of making the Stanley Cup playoffs? Basically, no one voted 100%. Basically, no one voted 75%. Few people voted 50%, but a whole bunch voted 25%. So thank you to everyone who chimed in on the poll. If I had to give an exact number, I'm probably somewhere between 25 and 50, maybe like a 33% chance, but it's not going great right now for the Boston Bruins. Colby, I do have an Ask DFO question for you. We saw Miro Heiskanen leave the game last night for the Dallas Stars after a collision with Mark Stone. Now, Mark Stone was tripped. Mark Stone also, I think, I'm viewing this a little bit like no?
Don't go there with me, please. This is a toe pick. It's a trip. This is not a dirty play. People are inferring here because they want to beat up on Mark Stone. He does sometimes play a little gray. I'm telling you, I watched the replay a bunch of times. It's rare that I totally disagree with Ray Ferraro. I have nothing but respect for him. He was on the broadcast for the U.S. broadcast last night from ESPN. This, to me, when a player is on his edges and somebody pokes at his foot, which happens here, he even toe picks with his left skate a little bit. This is a terrible outcome, but completely accidental. And that's why the Department of Player Safety, there's not going to be a hearing. There's not going to be a suspension. Terrible outcome, but not a bad hockey play. Unfortunately.
Yeah, and actually a bunch of people on the YouTube tend to agree with you. Jax, Randy, they all said it was a trip. Okay, daily bets for our friends at Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. I like the Toronto Maple Leafs in their spot this evening. I like them to cover the puck line. I like Austin Matthews to have a big game. Give me Poppy to get 2+ points. Give me the Leafs on the puck line and Matthews at 3+ shots on goal as well. It comes in at a very nice and juicy +400. The Wild don't have Kirill Kaprizov. They can't score when they don't have Kirill Kaprizov. Leafs are on home ice where they've been very good this season. So a nice +400 parlay. Nailed a +500 Leafs parlay last week. So I'm riding with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Let's wrap up the show with a little bit of garbage time. And this wasn't garbage, Colby. It was wildly entertaining last night. Tom Wilson versus Rasmus Andersson. Pat, run the video of the two of them in the penalty box. This is an all-time performance from two of the better agitators in the NHL. You have Wilson barking, hunched over. You have Anderson pretending, oh, I've been stabbed, mocking Tom Wilson, who kind of limped to the bench earlier. This is great stuff from these two. Yeah,
it was really fun to watch this. And then the best was when the Washington Capitals scored, and then Wilson was standing up in the box, like continuing to taunt at him for this. So I love that. We need to see more of this kind of stuff. We need more villains. We need more guys willing to go at each other in front of the cameras, in the penalty boxes where we can actually hear what they're saying and see what they're doing. So I loved it.
I love this one too. He does the Rasmus Anderson. You gotta put it all the way down like this. Look at her. It's just so funny, man.
Look, the cross check from Klapiko was a mean cross check.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I don't have any problems with it, but like that's a spot where like you're trying to inflict pain. I mean, he's down and he gets. I mean, not as if Tom Wilson's never done that before, but like Klapiko, he went for it there. Like you're gonna draw some blood when you have a decision like that.
Yeah. All right. Colby, great work today. Appreciate you popping on and filling in for our boy Frank as always. Everybody in the YouTube, you're great. Big shout out to our boy J-Pat as well. Should be a great night around the NHL. Handful of games on tap, and Drew Doughty is set to make his season debut. We will break all of that down tomorrow, right back here at noon Eastern. See you then. What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you're going to want to hit the subscribe button to not miss any of our content. From daily live shows with Frank Saravalli to analysis from former NHLers to exclusive interviews with some of the biggest names in the hockey world on Frankly Speaking. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button and stay up to date with everything going on in the hockey world.